Hey everybody, and welcome to Unit 8, Lesson 3. What are probabilities? First thing I would like for you to do is to go into your Google Classroom account, and you need to answer this question right here. Day 2, March 17th, question. It even tells you to do this first. So pause the video and go do that. Okay, I'm assuming you have paused the video and you have answered this question right here. And you can go and see what other classmates had to answer that question. But I wanted you to think about which of these two games would you want to play, and so make sure you go back and take a look at the conversation that is happening there for your class. I have the student task statement pulled up in front of me here. You have access to this as well through your Google Classroom. Click it, and you can edit it and work on it as if you were writing on it, or if you would want to, you don't have to do that. You can also just write it down on a piece of paper. There's two options here for you to do. So today's learning target is listed there. It's I can determine the probability of an event and express it as a fraction, decimal, or percentage. Now, when it says express it as that, it simply means to show it as one of those three. So it could be a fraction, decimal, or a percent. So the first question here, and there's a couple of these here. Before I go through this, I want to talk about some vocabulary, and then I'm going to go over A with you together, and then allow you some time to work on the rest on your own. And so, see, here's some vocabulary that you need to work on as you are looking at this. Okay, so it says experiment. If we use the word experiment, what I mean by that is that this is the term to describe any situation that has a probability chance. And so anything that deals with probability, sometimes we use the word experiment. Well, what is probability? Good question. That's the next definition. The measure of the likelihood the event will occur. It can be represented using a number between 0 and 1 as a fraction, decimal, or converted into a percent. Now, yesterday's work that you did, or lesson 2, used words like most likely, more likely, or never, and things like that. That's describing probability, but now we're going to start assigning some numbers to it. And so those numbers have to be between 0 and 1, and I'll show you what that means here in a minute. Some other words we're going to use. If I use random, that means it's the outcome of an experiment that is based on chance. And so what random has always meant. Sample space. If I use that word, you are to list all the possible outcomes in an experiment. Well, what are outcomes? That's always the next question when a word we might not know is in a definition. Well, an outcome is the possible result in a chance experiment. So I'll talk about that here in a minute, but you might see the variable n. N is the sample space. And so let's do one together here. So back on the student task statements, okay, you don't have access to that definition, but you do have access to our class notes. So take a look at this. This is your class notes. That's also in your Google Classroom. And everything I went over just now is right there. And so you can always go back and look at that or even rewatch the video. So on the first situation here, it says for each situation, list the sample space and tell how many outcomes there are. So you are to do two things, sample space and how many outcomes there are. And so I'm going to do the first one together, and I'm going to pause it and let you work on the others before I go over it. So A says, Han rolls a standard numbered cube once. Well, if I think of a cube, I know that it has 6 sides to it. So my sample space are the possibilities that cube could be. So I'm typing in here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. That's my sample space. How many total outcomes are there? Well, 7. There are 7 possible outcomes in this that I could use. And so you're going to continue doing that for the spinner, for the letter, for the word math, the alphabet, and a card, And for both of those, you need to do the sample space and how many outcomes there are. So I'll pause the video, or you need to pause the video so that you can go and work on those and then come back here and check your work. Okay, hopefully you've paused the video and you've already done the rest of these questions that I've asked you to do. So you should have only worked down to E with Noah picking a card. So Claire spins the spinner once, so one time. Well, the sample space are all of the possible choices I can choose from. So that would be red, blue, green, and yellow. How many outcomes are there? 4. So each one of these is one possible outcome that Claire could spin. On C, I'm trying to pick a letter at random from the word math. So any letter from the word math. So my sample space is M-A-T-H, spells math. How many outcomes are there? Well, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4. So 4 outcomes on that one. On selecting a random letter from the alphabet, well, first you had to remember how many letters of the alphabet are there. And there are 26. You could have listed every single letter. I'm just going to put A through Z. And how many outcomes are there? Well, if I count all those up, that's where that 26 is put. So Noah picks a card from a stack that has cards numbered 5 through 12. So the sample space would be every single number from 5 to 20. Sorry, not 12, 20. So 5 through 20. How many possible outcomes? So if I go and count every single number that I could possibly pick, that would give me 16 possible outcomes. Now this next part, you're looking at the likelihood of each of these scenarios and comparing them. And so it says, and this is where we're going to have to do some math here that we've not had to do just yet on this, and that your cooldown is going to ask you to do as well. So it says, is Claire more likely to have the spinner stop on red or the blue section? So when you're going to find a probability, the red is one choice out of 4. So if we go back up to Claire, I see there's 4 choices here. The red is one of those 4. And so if you think of it in a fraction, well, if Claire lands from anywhere in the red, that's 1/4 of the total. So I'm going to write down here that red is 1/4 of the total. Blue is also 1/4 of the total. That's 1 out of 4 chances, or total chances, to land on blue. So blue is 1 out of 4 total. And so on this one, both are equally likely to occur, red and blue. Okay, red and blue is both equally likely to occur on the spinner. Now, that's a fraction. 1/4 as a decimal is 0.25, and then as a percent, it's 25%. And so that's one of the 3 ways, or all 3 ways, to show a probability of something happening. And so if you take a look back at the definition, the outcome is all the possible results in an experiment, typo, where n is the sample space. And so when you're setting up your fraction on, for example, on the red, n is 4. So let me zoom in a little bit. You can see the answers better there. And so my n is the 4, and I was trying to pick red. I only had one of those, so I only had a one-time chance to pick that out. And so I built the fraction as 1 divided by 4, or the fraction bar 4. And so 4 is the total number of chances I would have. On this one, okay, if you take a look at this one, and apologies for pronouncing the names, but Kieran was the one that was selecting the word math. Well, If Karen selected math, that's 1 out of 4 letters. So my fraction of that would be 1/4. And that's for Karen. Or 25%, or 0.25. For May, she had to pick letters from all of the alphabet. Well, there's still only one T in the alphabet, except now it's 1 out of 26 total letters, or 1 fraction bar 26, or, let me do some quick math. And so if I'm trying to find the decimal, you have to do 1 divided by 26, and I get 0.038 and a bunch of other numbers. Just going to stop there. I want to round to 0.04, or that's 4%. And so which person is more likely to get a better chance to get a T? Well, it's going to be Karen. Karen has 25% chance to get a letter T, and May only has a 4% chance to get a letter T. So on the last one, Han and Noah, remember Han had the cube, so that was 1A, that would be answered above. And Noah was the card, a stack of cards of numbers 5 through 20. And so for Han had the dice, and only one of those numbers would be above 5. 1 out of 6. So the dice had 6 possible choices. So that's 1 chance out of 6 to get a number higher than 5. The fraction will be 1/6 of that. Okay, well, what's the decimal and what's the percent? Find the decimal first by dividing 1 divided by 6. And I'll round to 0.17, or 17%. For Noah, Noah had the cards, and if you take a look at that, there were 16 possible outcomes. Well, only 15 of those, because you cannot include the 5, 15 of those would be above 5. And so I would say 15 out of 16 would be above or greater than 5, as it says on here. Well, type that into my calculator, and I get, well, first make the fraction 15 out of 16, or put it in your calculator, divide 15 divided by 16, round to get 0.94, or I could say it's 94%. And so Han or Noah is more likely to get a number greater than 5? Well, Noah is, because he's got 94%. Okay, take a look at number 3 and try that on your own, and then come back and I'll talk about it. So for the last question, hopefully you had a chance to try it on your own, and hopefully you've already read it. And so if I take a look, I've got 2 options. Well, for the 7-day option, that's 7 days a week. If I say, well, today's Monday, I'm making the video, and so what are my chances to pick Monday? What's 1 out of 7? The fraction would be 1/7. Decimal would be 0.14, or 14%. For the day of the month, and so right now it's March, that's 1 out of 12. That's 1 out of 12. The fraction would be 1 fraction bar 12. Divide by 1 divided by 12 to find the decimal, and that would be 0.08. And then convert that to the percent by multiplying by 100 and get 8%. So which one would be more likely to spend the current day of the week or pull the paperclip with the current month? It's going to be the one with the higher percentage, decimal, or fraction. And so that would be 7 days a week. You could have done this without math by thinking about which one had fewer choices. 7 days. Last thing I want you to do is just create a situation that has 5 outcomes, and that could be anything, and that can go there. So the last thing you need to do is read through the summary, and then also answer the question for the cooldown, and email either whoever your math teacher is, so Mr. Shepard, Mr. Krauser, or Ms. Connerummel for help.